The Fullmetal Alchemist live-action movie is certainly a movie that exists, but for a long time, despite my wide array of FMA-related content, I didn't really feel interested in covering it. Like, whoa, live-action adaptation of an anime is bad. Who could have thought? It just felt a bit redundant, I guess. But that was before it happened. That was before everything changed. It's a hot, humid summer day. I'm playing Super Smash Bros. Online with a group of friends, chatting on the phone with them. One of them brings up how they can't get into anime. You will call him Greg. So I, carefully, so as to not scare him away, ask him which ones he's tried to watch before. He doesn't offer many examples, but that's okay. He probably just forgot what he watched. So I have a suggestion for him. Fullmetal Alchemist, I say. I think you might enjoy that one. He replies.
Nah, I tried watching it. It sucked.
Oh, which one? There are a couple of different versions. You might have watched an older one or one called Brotherhood.
It wasn't Brotherhood. It was a movie.
Oh, do you remember the title? You might have watched the spin-off movie for Brotherhood or the movie conclusion to one of the series, which would make no sense without context.
I don't think it was either of those.
By now, I'm confused. He must be remembering wrong. If it wasn't one of these, then what could he have possibly? My mind stutters. My brain buzzes with fear. Was it animated or live action?
It was live action.
On its face, this might be an easy thing to criticize. How could someone mix up the Fullmetal Alchemist movie with the anime? That's such a silly thing to do, but for someone who doesn't know anything about anime, who has maybe just heard about a title called Fullmetal Alchemist or was simply scrolling through Netflix and saw a movie, this is an innocent and understandable mistake. And so I turned to Netflix, I looked on there through its titles, and what I discover, it still haunts me. There was no anime available. It was only the live-action film adaptation. Now, I don't know how it is in other parts of the world, but in Canada, this is the only version of FMA available on the streaming platform, which is worse than having nothing. Because that means that when your regular viewer looks up Fullmetal Alchemist and sees this as the only option, they're gonna assume that this is it. That moment of comprehending what this meant, the true terror of it all, it was when I knew I needed to tear this film apart, deconstruct it, and reconstruct this moment of horror into something positive. And in this case, what could be more positive than negativity? So with that out of the way, it's time to critique the Fullmetal Alchemist live-action film. Let's do it. Let's start with the first thing I noticed, the appearance. The movie, it looks really off. The color correcting appears far too saturated and yet washed out at the same time. I think it's due to many of the scenes having exceptionally flat lighting along with an overall lack of deep blacks in the image. Normally I might not be too hung up on this sort of thing, but I also normally don't notice this being much of a problem in the first place. Like, I'm not sure what YouTube is gonna do to the footage, but watching it on my TV, it gave it a cheap, almost soap opera look. Moment to moment, the pacing of these scenes is awful too, sometimes to the point of being incomprehensible or confusing. Take this moment where Ed is running away from Cornello's pillars of stone. He's really close to this wall, gets hit, and then falls to the ground. When he gets up and starts running though, this isn't where he was. How'd he get here? Who knows? Then the special effects. There are the rare moments where they look fine, and I'm sure people put a lot of effort into them. But for the most part, they range from mediocre to terrible. And unfortunately, Alphonse is one of these bad parts, which is a big problem considering that he's one of our main characters. Really, looking at the CGI for him, I couldn't help but wonder why they didn't do the majority of his stuff with a guy in an actual suit of armor or something made to look like it. This is just one of those basic things you need to get right because he's in so much of the movie, and this film simply doesn't. The same goes for major moments like the failed human transmutation. Ugh. Now, poor special effects are enough of a problem on their own because they can take me out of the moment, out of the magic of the movie. But they're even worse here because every instance where this happens, where it looks poor, it's just another point where I have to ask myself, why? Why did this happen? If for whatever reason this movie didn't have the ability to use proper special effects, why even bother? The anime looks totally fine, and that's part of the wonderful thing with animation. It's all coming from people's imaginations, just being put down onto paper, onto a computer, so we don't need to worry about blending real life with animation because it's all animation. This way, fantastical television has a great opportunity to look wonderful in animation. So why do this? But hey, maybe the performances will bring a different element to these characters. I mean, the voice acting was already great in Fullmetal Alchemist, but whatever. Maybe this will be crap. This is certainly something, isn't it? Why does everyone look so stiff and awkward? Why does Ed keep making these faces? Why is Winry being like this? The only person who's doing okay is Hughes. He's mostly decent. Otherwise, wow, what a time to be alive, folks. What I think happened here is that the film is trying to emulate the anime right down to how the characters move. So it's not enough for the actor to run like a person. They need to run like an anime character. But these are two totally different mediums. I shouldn't need to tell you that you can't just transplant these scenes or the way characters move and react and expect them to work here. But they did. Even though you could just go watch the anime. Although, wait, you can't in Canada, at least not on Netflix. Oh no! Ah, gluttony, what the? No, get away from me! Ah! But so far, I've been comparing the movie to its anime counterpart quite a bit. So sure, the presentation and acting are still very bad, but let's set that aside for a second. In and of itself, how is this story? Well, as much as I'd like to do that, I can't, because this story doesn't make any sense. Key moments from the anime and manga have been lifted out and randomly placed into a film runtime with seemingly little consideration given to how they actually flow together into a narrative. Like, if I hadn't experienced another version of the story, what would be my impression of this whole Yor chase? I don't know. Not much, because at this point we have little to no understanding of who Cornello is, why the brothers are chasing him, what this place is, and what this means for our characters. All of that important stuff, it's been cut out in favor of getting to this iconic shot as fast as possible. And really, the whole movie is like that, with these loosely stapled together scenes that have little in the way of logic, conflict, escalation, or flow. For example, let's look at the Nina and Tucker section. This is important to the manga and anime, so I get why they would want to have it in here. But first, let's consider how this functioned in the manga. There, we had already gone through a few episodic adventures with our protagonist and his brother, got an idea of their personalities, goals, and drives through seeing their actions. And that likely lulled the readers into a false sense of security with Tucker. This would be just another fun episodic adventure, right? But no. After Nina got dogified, it was clear that something had changed. What alchemy could represent, the direction the story could go in, the way this and the brothers' subsequent plot with Scar led to a larger narrative, that's what this moment was about. So how does the movie go about placing this in here? Well, there are a couple changes made that could actually work. For one, Tucker is now also trying to help understand Al by hypnotizing him, and he's the one who makes Al think that maybe he's made of false memories instead of Barry the Chopper. Cool, I'm down for that. In a movie where we don't have all that much time for side characters, it's a perfectly fine idea to give Tucker this role. Similarly, Tucker ends up being a big part of the creation of these weird zombie soldiers, so he's given a role throughout the whole movie instead of being ridden out when Scar attacks him. Again, if we're gonna spend precious time on him in a movie, I don't think this is a bad idea. I actually think it's good. But there's still a big problem. None of this goes anywhere. Like, sure, Tucker makes this army, but what does it do? Nothing. It drops from the ceiling, eats Hakuro, who served as something of a Bradley replacement thus far, and the gang kills him. If this was all he was gonna do before being unceremoniously killed by homunculi, just why bother changing things and pretending he's gonna have a bigger role? Beyond that, Ed and Nina barely got any time together anyway, so it's not like I actually cared about this version of Nina. Of course, it's not like they had all that many scenes in the manga or Brotherhood either, but again, that's where the story's structure and the shock of that structure changing, that was able to do some of the heavy lifting. Similarly, Al's identity crisis doesn't mean anything here. Sure, I was honestly never the biggest fan of it in the manga or anime either, but at least there it was about bringing these brothers even closer together and having Winry help them through their problem they were having, showing them that they can't purely rely on themselves and that they need others. Here though, I don't know. They punch each other for a bit because this randomly comes to a head. This isn't used at all to explore the pain of Al's condition. Winry just yells a bit, and I don't buy a single thing. But easily my favorite weird plot moment has to be Ed's not flashback to his encounter with the truth. And I call it a not flashback because the movie does the most unnecessarily confusing thing here. See, instead of just having Ed's encounter be a normal flashback, it's a flashback and a nightmare. So now Ed is experiencing exactly what he did then, but he's also at his current age instead of being the age he should be. If I had never experienced this story before, I think my brain would have melted. Heck, my brain kind of melted here, trying to figure out who thought this was an acceptable idea. There's no reason for it. Why does he need to be his current age in the nightmare? Just have him remember what happened, show him at the proper age, there you go. Maybe they were worried about getting a compelling performance out of a child, but honestly, I don't think they needed to be concerned because it's not like this movie's got some fabulous acting throughout anyway. But you know what? I don't think I even blame the actors. Who knows what the heck was going on behind the scenes with this? And beyond that, these people basically had nothing to work with. Like, who are these main characters in the movie? Who's Ed? Well, we know he wants the Philosopher's Stone to help his brother and himself get their bodies back, but what about his personality beyond that? He doesn't have one. His arrogant moments in the lore are gone, and there's nothing here to replace them, so we don't get an idea of his overconfidence and headstrong nature, which is one of the most key parts of his character. Meanwhile, his actions are entirely inconsistent. Like, he doesn't want Al involved in some research because he's worried it's dangerous, and yet, after Marco gets murdered in front of him, he lets Winry stay behind alone to clean things up? What? You just saw someone die, Ed. If this is going to be a character who's concerned about and protective of his friends, maybe even to a fault, he wouldn't be bringing her here in the first place, never mind leaving her behind after this. Also, Ed's intelligence is gone, because now we barely focus on his human transmutation being some sort of impressive feat, and he doesn't even discover where Lab 5 is. Nah, other characters do that for him, and there's really nothing left for this guy to even do. And because Ed's personality is mostly non-existent, Al suffers too, because so much of his character just stems from this contrast to Ed. Ed is the one who's so certain of things, while Al is a bit more soft-spoken, mild-mannered, considerate, and concerned. Obviously, this is part of their fun dynamic. Gentle giant versus arrogant little guy. That kind of deal. And Al also suffers from his removed material, like their discussions with Rose, because again, now we don't get to see his gentler side. Mustang, meanwhile, has lost pretty much everything that he had going for him too. In the manga and anime, despite Ed's annoyance with him, Mustang would still try to help them. I mean, that's part of why they went to go see Tucker in the first place. But now introducing them to Tucker is Hakuro's idea, so guess that's gone for Mustang. Then there's Mustang's leadership abilities and his friendship with Hughes. Those two things are mostly gone since he no longer has his gang of loyal allies, and his relationship with Hughes seems far less friendly. Even in the moments where they could have leaned into his care for his comrades, they didn't. Like the Lust versus Mustang moment. This wasn't just about Mustang blasting Lust with flames. This was about him swooping in to save people after they believed he was dead. About his anger at seeing someone try to hurt them. But yeah, that's not happening here. Oops. Also, Winry, sure, she's, yeah, I'm not even gonna bother. I knew it going in. You probably knew it too. This is bad. This is not a good adaptation. It's not a good movie on its own. It's bad. But you know who didn't know? Greg. Greg didn't know. Greg was an unknowing, blameless victim to this movie. And how many others are there like him? There was no reason for this. There was no reason to make this. And the fact that some poor suckers out there are gonna watch this and think that this is even remotely representative of FMA makes me kinda sad. But of course, this can't be the end. They had to make 2 more of these. Complete the trifecta. Make the full deal, the whole story. Cover it. And that means that I have 2 more movies to cover. So yeah, come on back next time if you're interested in seeing that. Either way, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and see ya next time.